All right, what's up, guys? So today we're just going to be talking about some pretty simple concepts, but when the market is pretty, redundant and boring as it is today, it's probably best to just kind of scratch all this out, right? Unless you're that person who's grinding throughout the bear market via, trading and understanding the psychology of pressing the buttons and learning a little bit more about yourself, and your own emotional discipline, things of that nature. There's probably not too much here for you at the moment, right? So obviously, very quick BTC analysis is just simply we're now bearish retesting this trend, right? And we haven't really done anything too significant. We managed to pump from yesterday's low back into the exact same, prices that we've been trading in for about 3 or 4 days prior to that, prior to making that low. So we're kind of just going to scratch all this off, and the idea is to provide some more value, some more education for those of you who are looking for that kind of stuff to build a bigger foundation off of, so that when the market becomes more interesting you can actually go and take advantage of it. So I'll be right back, and we're going to cut and just start discussing some pretty simple concepts, but a nice solid foundation of like the basics, the fundamentals, just to provoke some thinking, and then we'll go from there. Oh, really quick, I almost forgot that I'm an influencer. So I'm giving away a PS5 through Bybit on Christmas Day. And truly, not too many people have actually signed up to be, part of that giveaway. There's like 4 or 5 people that are actually eligible. So for anyone who wants to sign up, you all you have to do is register under my Bybit link and then deposit at least $100, and that makes you eligible to win a PS5. So yeah, almost forgot that I'm an influencer. All right, so what we're going to be discussing today is my 3 aspects that kind of defines what it means to be a trader, right? So the 3 things that you always kind of have to account for when you're looking to trade or just simply be a market participant. This can be investing or anything, right? So the first one is obviously risk reward, and that's just this number here. We can quite clearly tell what our risk reward is at any given time, right? It's tangible. It's something that we're able to just look at, and these numbers dictate exactly what is the risk reward. So it's pretty simple. Probabilities are a little bit more complex because we don't have the luxury of, like, let's for example discuss something like blackjack. So if you know anything about blackjack or 21, whatever you call it, you'll know that if the dealer deals you a hard 16, meaning you get dealt a 16, right? And the dealer themselves are showing a face card. Statistically, when you're in that scenario, you should always hit, right? And you're going to think, oh, but if I get anything above a 5, then I'm screwed and I'm going to bust. And that's stupid. No, I should stand. But statistically, the probabilities over a long period of time say that you're better off hitting in that scenario, right? So we don't have that luxury in trading. So what I like to do is I like to add to this perceived probabilities, right? Because we don't know what the probabilities are at any given time. We just perceive them, right? I would assume that when something is downtrending, and if we were ever going to downtrend on a higher extent, or to a more exaggerated extent, we would have to downtrend on a low extent first, right? You'd have to show that on low time frames first. So therefore, we can kind of assume probabilities and skew our perception of them in either way just by assessing what is price action doing at any given time, right? And that goes back to kind of like the snowman versus the snowball to snowman way of thinking. And it kind of has a little bit to do with like my 4-second rule, which kind of accounts for, hey, at any given time, what price action is doing just as well as I do, just as well as a 4-year-old does, right? So that simple way of thinking, and you break that down, and so now you're able to account for risk reward, right, which is these numbers, the 12.4 and then the 2.1, and perceived probabilities. So when you combine these two, you have a setup, right? That's what makes a setup. It's just that. It's just 2 things. This setup does not account for the third, right, and most important one, your personal situation. Meaning, if you're already exposed to the market, 90% of your entire net worth is exposed to the market. Do you really want to be taking a reversal setup with low, right? We perceive it to be low probability and obviously very high risk reward, right? Because what is this going to do for you? What is an extra 12R going to do for you if you're already 90% exposed to the market, right? Your entire, basically your entire net worth. Probably not going to do too much, right? So when you account for your personal situation, then this isn't really an appealing take. At the same time, right, if you're looking to take this setup and you're underexposed to the market, let's say you're net negative on the market and you just want to take a little long hedge, right? You're accounting for your personal situation. And you're going to see how, once I start to break this down in more real life examples, how these three things kind of affect us in day-to-day basis. So yeah, this is usually where people just kind of click off the video, but don't do that. um, if you're accounting for your personal situation, right? Maybe this is an appealing take, or an appealing trade for you, right? Because you want some exposure to the market, and it's in your best interest to take this high, rewarding trade, even though it's low probability, because you already have a downside, net negative exposure. So if we keep going, it's not really that big of a deal, right? So maybe it's kind of worth it to you. So you're going to see how, when we relate this back into real life, this starts to make a lot more sense. And it's kind of almost comical that people don't break things down in this three, ways and consider each and every single one, because you do it in everyday life, right? And before we move on to that concept, I do just want to say your personal situation goes deep, right? It goes very, very deep. So it's something as simple as, hey, your personal situation, meaning how much income do you have, right? How much do you have, in your bank account? How much can you afford to lose? Are you someone who's, very risk aggressive and has all the freedom in the world to take on risk? Or do you have a family to feed and a mortgage to pay, right? What is your personal situation? So if you really deeply put an emphasis on this one, these two are fucking easy. They really are easy. They're so trivial in comparison to this one. If you master this one, then this stuff, right? Drawing the setups becomes second nature. It really, really does. So you're going to see how they all kind of affect each other. So let's give some quick examples, right? How do you do this stuff in your everyday life? So every single day, a lot of you get into your car and you drive to work, right? That is a risk reward scenario. Your risk is that you get into a car accident on the highway, right? The reward is you get to work. You perceive the probabilities of you getting into a car accident to be very, very low, right? I would hope that most of us have not really been in many car accidents. So, all that time that you've been driving, you've never been in an accident. So, you would kind of think, oh, there's a low chance that today is the day I get into an accident, right? Your personal situation is you need to get to work. You need this reward so that you can, get money so that you can pay your bills. So when you line up risk reward probabilities and your personal situation, it's in your best interest to get into that car and drive to work. As soon as one of these skew very, very heavily, then all of a sudden you might find that, your decision making process shifts. And what I mean by that is your risk can stay the same, right? You get into a car accident, it could be potentially lethal, obviously, and that's pretty scary. The reward is also still the same, but all of a sudden the probabilities of you getting into an accident have skewed dramatically, and now they've increased, right? So now let's say for this scenario, maybe there's heavy fog, right, or low visibility and ice on the road, right, or a certain highway gets closed down, you have to go into a back route that you're not familiar with, or whatever it may be. But all of a sudden, the probabilities may skew heavily. And per your personal situation, even though you need to get to work still, you might, deduce these three. And when you count for all three, you might say, yeah, I'm going to call in today. Right. Or let's say that your personal situation changes, right? The probabilities have stayed the same, the risk reward has stayed the same, but your personal situation is you just hit the lottery. Are you gonna take that risk of getting into your car and driving to work? Probably not, right? And it's like, so when you kind of account for those three things, and I understand that it's very silly, but there's another way to kind of think about it so that we can compare this and this. And you're going to find that when you stop looking for scenarios that are very high in probability but low in risk reward, aka this setup, and you stop taking trades that are high in risk reward and low in probability, like this setup, and you find a sort of balance in between those, then these together become easy. And then all that you have to do is really just focus on this one, your personal situation. Something as simple as, oh, I understand how much income I have. I understand how much of a safety net I have. I understand how much, risk that I'm allowed to take on when I approach this market. I understand those kinds of concepts very, very deeply. So all I have to do is find setups that I perceive to be decently probable with solid risk reward, right? So let's break it down. And it's not rocket science, and I'm going to prove it to you. So let's say you have a, you know, 19-year-old kid, or no, that wouldn't be realistic. A 23-year-old kid, right, just got out of college, just graduated. He has a bachelor's degree in computer science, and he wants to go get a job at Google, right? So he wants to move to California. He lives in whatever Texas, right? So he's going to move halfway across the country and try and go apply for a job at Google. Now, what's the chance that he gets that job? It's very low, right? We can all understand that. He has no work experience. Google's going to look at him and say, dude, you got to intern for us first, right? That takes 2 years, and then you can resubmit your resume, blah, 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 whatever, right? But the risk is pretty low for him. I mean, if he doesn't get that job, what? He moved to California, he gained some, life experience, he got to go hang out with some cute chicks, whatever, and you got to party for like 3 months. He waited for somebody to call him back and they told him, oh yeah, you didn't get the job, sorry, whatever. And he moves back to his, parents' house in Texas and applies for a job there. No harm done, right? Not really too big of a deal. The reward is if he gets that job at Google, right? Now he's set himself up for absolute success moving forward. If by some miracle, right, because we perceive it to be low probabilities, if by some miracle he gets that job at Google, then now his whole life is, set in stage for massive success moving forward, right? But what's his personal situation? His personal situation might be that he has, someone to take care of at home. He might not be able to move out to, California, or maybe he doesn't want to leave his girlfriend and his girlfriend can't come with him, right? Those kinds of things. But when you only acknowledge these two and you don't apply any more context to the situation, then it seems, right? And you can argue for either side. It seems like something that is very high in reward, right? Very low in risk, right? But not very probable. So notice how when we take something out of the context, right? It does not matter what his personal situation is. You can argue just as well as I can that this is a good bet to make, just as well as you can, argue that it's a terrible bet to make. It's not even worth the risk, even though the risk is very low, right? That's this setup. It doesn't matter. It's something that you can look at and say, well, Mercury, there's a 12.5R risk reward. I don't care what the probabilities are. I'm going to take it, right? You can make that argument. At the same time, you could say, well, Mercury, that's the same person who tried to buy the dip here and there and there and there and there and there and there too, right? So if they're right this time around, which is very unlikely that they will be, it probably doesn't matter because they've been wrong all the other times. Low probability. So you can argue why it's a bad trade, you can argue why it's a good trade, right? Same exact scenario, but now we're going to change the risk reward. We're going to, change the probabilities. So now all of a sudden, you have a 50-year-old, right? And let's say he's been running his own computer science, business or IT business, whatever. And Google needs a new, manager for the field that he is an absolute expert on. And they see that he has, all these accolades and decades of experience. So what's the chance of him getting that job when he goes to apply for it. It's very high, right? Those probabilities are very high. He's going to get that job, right? There's a really solid chance that, someone else's resume is going to be more impressive than his. But what's the reward or what's the risk, right? So the reward is maybe he starts making, 60 grand extra a year than what he's already making. He's already well off. Maybe now he gets to put, oh, I worked for Google, right? I was a, CEO or, whatever, not CEO, but, I was a manager for my dedicated field at Google. And I get to put that on my resume. And it sounds cool when I talk to people, at parties and whatnot, which he's probably not going to very many of if he's 50 years old, right? So that's the reward. The reward has very little upside. It's not very appealing, but the risk is that if he tries to go move out to California for a couple months or whatnot, and he tries to go apply for that job at Google and do an in-face interview, he might have to leave his kids during their college graduation, or maybe he has to, right, pick up his family and move them along with him. And maybe his wife can't, just up and leave work all of a sudden, and she has to quit her job, and then they have to go find something else. Maybe he has to sell his business, right, that he already owns and has made him well off for, and take that risk of having to start over all over again, right? Those kinds of things. So the risk is very high. The reward is not too appealing, even though the probabilities are very good, right? That's this setup. You want to find yourself somewhere in between. When you find that balance, right, this stuff becomes easy. You know how to perceive probabilities, and if you don't, I have plenty of videos that I, referenced earlier that will help you with that. I promise you it's not rocket science. And the most arrogant thing that you will probably ever hear me say is that perceiving which way the market is headed is actually the easiest part of trading, right? Do we understand how arrogant that is? Because it is arrogant. It's the easiest part of trading. Which way is this headed? Which way is this headed? Right? It's simple. You understand probabilities, and the risk reward is quite literally a tangible number that you can look at that is already calculated for you. You know this stuff. You just have to be able to break it down and digest it for, your brain, which is hopefully not as puny as mine is, right? It's probably pretty hard to be. And then as long as you have this down pat, it's not going to matter, right? Over time, you're going to find that because of the balance that you've managed to continuously sort of apply for these two things, and you have this totally under control, it's going to be pretty much redundant whether this plays out or not, right? Or whether this plays out or not. Long term, you will become a winner. So that's my honest, dogma. That's my belief. That's my philosophy, and I do apply this in every single, trade that I take, every single market move that I ever have made. To me, it's all chess, right? And because I have this down pat, I, operate with these two things in accordance to whatever this is at that given time. Because this one's always going to change. You always have to adapt with it. So I hope you guys found this video useful and at least entertaining. I try to make you guys laugh when I can. Again, I have to do my shill fluencing. So if you guys are not signed up and registered under my Bybit link, then get on it because you can probably, win a PS5. There's a pretty solid chance of that happening. And also, Bybit is just doing a ton of, campaigns and giveaways and stuff. They're giving away a car, and they're giving away like 100 iPhone 14s and some other stuff, some USDT coupons, some, whatever. So lots and lots of cool stuff. I don't even know what they have going on right now, like a whole like lottery kind of thing. You can win like $50 USDT or like some trading fee coupons to get off on your fees and rebates and whatnot, all that kind of stuff. So really, really cool stuff. And obviously that does support me and it helps me out a lot. So if you guys have found any use in my trading education playlist or any of these videos, the analysis, all that kind of stuff, directional bias, even just the tweets, right? Then supporting me through signing up to my Bybit ref link is definitely the best way to support me. So much appreciate all you guys. Again, thank you so much. Like, comment, subscribe, share with your grandmother because I'm sure she wants to understand risk reward probabilities in her personal situation as well. And take it easy, guys.